Welcome back to the Social Web TV, and it is, as always, a lot going on. There's so much going on that we want to have a special guest who can help put us all in perspective. Welcome, Jeremiah Owyang from Forrester.
Hey, thanks.
Cool. Well, last week we did a special episode where we had highlights reel from an event that we were at over at Facebook, which was a technology tasting where there was some really cool stuff rolled out. What was all that, Joseph?
Well, it's certainly a big day for those of you loyal viewers who have been following the opening up of the social web. As many of you will know, there's a site called Facebook. It's pretty big, does some social stuff.
I've heard of that.
Always been a big question about how open Facebook will be and where's that all going. And they really showed, they've been talking about being open, but they really showed a great commitment with the launch of a new OpenStream API where for the first time, that stream of activity from you and all your friends that really is the lifeblood of the service is now something that other applications can read from and write back to, and it opens up a whole new sort of ecosystem around that. So it was kind of fun to be able to be one of the launch partners at Plaxo, where you can now connect your Plaxo and Facebook accounts together, and not only can you start to see the content that your Facebook friends are sharing, like you would a feed from Twitter or Flickr or something else, but you no longer have to refriend all of your Facebook friends on Plaxo. If you want, you can just say, let me honor those Facebook relationships that I've already got as friends over on Plaxo. So really
kind of an end to refriend madness.
Refriend madness, exactly. So a lot of the things we've talked about on this show of how you should be in control of your data and you should be able to move around between different sites and have it all just work. Really exciting to see that start to really materialize, and especially with sites as big as Facebook. So been a big week. And Dig's since rolled out a similar integration, so it's really cool to see that starting to spread to big sites.
So those are examples of what I call social colonization. And that's a term when you and your friends can go wherever you are on the web. And that makes it convenient for people and users, because they don't have to log in and register, and then I can see what my friends like on different sites.
Yeah, in fact, Jeremiah just recently published a report in which that term social colonization is used in conjunction with, what is it, one of the five
eras, right, of the social web.
What's the rundown?
Okay, really quickly. We did research on this, and I interviewed smart folks like you guys. And there's 5 eras. And the first one is the era of social relationships. And this is when people connect to each other, and they share information with each other. We've seen this in social networks for years, starting with AOL, perhaps one of the first. Now, the second one is the era of social functionality. And this is when social networks become operating systems, and you can do interesting things with like applications on top of these things. What's your favorite app, Joseph?
Gee, it's been so long since I've seen apps in the sites. My favorite application is that the web itself is becoming a social application.
Okay, but
how's that for an artful dodge?
Yeah, it is okay. But I would guess it could have been like throwing sheep or something, or I like, or
I really do like the music and book ones. I end up finding a lot. I love the Netflix integration. I love Goodreads and Living Social and those whole. Yeah.
And it's helpful because you can interact with your friends now, right?
Yeah, I always, it's like especially professional colleagues where I wouldn't normally get around to like what are you reading, but when you just sort of see it, you end up getting closer to the person.
So this second phase is characterized by things like platform F8 from Facebook or Open Social.
Open Social, right. So the third one is the era of social colonization, to your point. We're starting to see that just in this year. And this is basically wherever you go, your friends come with you. And that makes things very interesting. And it's very scary to companies because it means every single product, even if you don't choose for it to be, can be rated and ranked by us, by you and me. So that changes things a lot.
Although it's exciting for, every site has the same problem of how do I get all these users to come to my site? How do I get them to sign up and fill in information and find their friends over and over and over again? And so if it actually is now getting easier for sites to let users skip all that, and it's certainly what the users want,
right.
There's probably a lot of people who are pretty happy about this too.
Yeah. The only question people are wanting to know is, do I really want all of my friends to come with me all over the web?
Right.
Because some of my friends from college, I don't want them with my other friends. So the next era is what we call the era of social context. And this is because if you have a federated ID or any type of ID, even the Plaxo ID, in the future, it's not here yet, you can expose parts of that ID and you can go to different websites and they will give you a personalized or contextual experience if you choose to allow certain parts of your information. Imagine going to Amazon.com and without registering, although you probably have an account, you could start to get information that's recommended to you based upon your friends or things that you've done. And that creates some interesting ties.
MySpace is probably the furthest along here in terms of showing. They've got these demos where you can log into like a music site with your MySpace ID and it pulls in your profile and friends list and starts showing you what they're listening to. And it's a very seamless experience. It's pretty cool to see glimmers of that to come.
Right. That would be that's definitely a first step. But to see that outside of, to the whole World Wide Web, outside of social networks.
Right.
I think the view is social networks become kind of a layer on top of the World Wide Web, where you can access your friends from wherever you are. And I think that's what's interesting.
Yeah.
So the next era, the last one, the fifth one, this is as far as we can see. There's definitely going to be more. But we call this the era of social commerce. And this is when communities define the products that they want. And eventually the model will flip over where communities can say, this is the type of product we want, and we want it to have these types of features and specs. Then they will allow companies to bid for this and say, who wants to build this product for us, and will you build it at the lowest possible price? So it changes things over. And I look at Doc Searles a lot, who's leading VRM from the Berkman Institute.
Doc's been on our show.
Good.
Albeit briefly, but it's memorable.
Yeah. So the questions are, what type of products do you think would be most amicable to social commerce? And it's hard to say, but I think it would probably be consumer products, probably more than medical products. Just don't know, that could be a little bit dangerous.
I'm looking for an insulin pump with Hello Kitty. Is that...
So those are the 5 eras, and we've already made it through a couple of them. How far out is it, like where are we at now, and what's sort of timeline for phases 4 and 5?
Yeah, that's going to be a few years. So not for 2 or 3 years will we see the era of social context, and then commerce is definitely going to take a lot longer. So we're looking 5 years out for maturity for some of these things right now. Even though, so the first era is the only one that's mature. The rest of the eras, we've started functionality with Facebook F8 in 2007, and now social colonization is happening. All those things you mentioned just earlier, but neither of those are mature yet. We're not seeing true business applications, and it's not ubiquitous. So we're still in the early days. You guys have a job for a few more years, I think.
Whew, I was worried there for a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
wow. Well, it's kind of interesting because I think obviously the folks who watch this show frequently probably share this view that we're right now entering this new phase of what we call the social web. And but there's a lot of folks out there more mainstream, less technology oriented, maybe folks at big brand companies. I know you get to see a bit more of that world. How are people perceiving this? Is this social networking, social web stuff something that's been internalized yet?
Well, there's 2 ways to look at this. From the consumer side, this is being adopted rapidly. In fact, social network adoption, or internet adoption for that matter, is one of the fastest growing mediums that we've seen of any medium across all of history. Now, this recession is actually a blessing for the social networking space. The adoption is increased because people have more time, or they want to, because they don't have a job, and they want to connect to each other. They want to learn from each other, and they're doing that in social networks. So we're seeing the growth numbers come up. Facebook's at 200 million. Twitter is at 10 million, but one of the fastest growing, or around that, but it's one of the fastest growing social networks.
Oh yeah, they clocked something like close to 100% growth month over month.
That's right.
Which is just
Well,
astounding.
it must have been a lot of fun for their operations and engineering team.
They've hit the bottom of the hockey curve.
Right.
Yeah, so the adoption here is happening, and we're tracking this around the globe, and definitely the youth are. Now, the other part of that equation, so there's 3 pieces. There's the consumers, there's you guys that are what I call vendors in the middle, and then there's the brands. The brands are scared. They don't know how to do this. And when they come to social networks, they use the typical internet advertising and internet marketing that you would see, like they're deploying, literally, I think deploying is a good verb here, they're deploying microsites on social networks. And they're not tapping into the truly social experience. So they're not doing it well.
I think there's an interesting thing I'd like to get your feedback on, which is, in some ways you could think of a 4th player in this space as well, which is media sites.
Sure.
Now, I don't mean like TV itself or radio, but for example, the newspapers, we know they're going through a heck of a time right now, and they're trying to figure out printing on paper versus what do I do with my online site. And on the web, they're getting viewers, but they're not getting very good at getting people to register, and they're not very good at being able to monetize those folks. So we think there's some interesting things there, particularly around this colonization idea. Like, what if you could easily, a click or two on board to one of these media properties and bring some of your profile data so that you could actually be seeing some ads that are more relevant?
That's assuming that advertising is the right business model for them. That I'm not actually sure that's going to be the case.
Right.
That maybe a subscription model, so that people have been talking about a pure subscription model, going back to that might be the way to do that rather than force people to click through on ads that may not even be related. So there's a lot of things around that. What I look at is the Guardian in the UK.
Yeah.
They, like Best Buy, they tapped into the Mashables API, the Masheries API.
Yeah.
So this means that third-party developers can reuse the Guardian's articles, but they have to be part of their advertising network. So we're starting to see innovation come out of the media space, and so that's a change. In particular, who I'm watching is the traditional TV media and how they're adopting here. A lot of them are streaming their shows now and forcing ads that you have to watch it because it's streamed. So that's a good way that you can't TiVo through that easily because you have to force through that.
So we'll give it a few months.
I guess you could. I guess you could record it and then go over it. It's possible. So it's interesting to see how that's happening, how the media is adopting these things.
And it seems though there's like so much change happening so quickly that there's got to be this lag as the folks who've been accustomed to buying ads one way or thinking about reaching their customers one way through big spends of ads. Like
that's a problem for big companies, is because the social web isn't about big groups of people. It's about smaller segments of specific interest. And
so just having one perfect ad that you try and figure out how to buy a spot for that.
That's the old model. The new model is smaller, more relevant, more contextual experiences for a particular community. And the real trick is to let the community be empowered to help create that experience, because then they're more likely to share it. Then they're more likely to own it. Then they're more likely to endorse it. So companies got to figure that flip over, and it's a big challenge for most of them.
It's a really tricky balance because you start to see these inklings of when a product starts to get popular within a community. You think about there's so much enthusiasm around the Palm Pre, for example, and what does Palm do with that? They're obviously worried about losing control, but they want to let them take it and share it, and it's really clear that they want to do the right thing, but they're not sure exactly what to do. But there's really a big opportunity there. But if they do the wrong thing, then they can alienate the community. That could be the worst thing they could do, right? So it's like you're sort of playing with fire almost. But
it's also interesting for me personally, like when I'm not a host of a TV show in my other job, I'm a VP of marketing. And my role as a marketer has changed fundamentally in the last 18 months. And I've got Twitter or TweetDeck open all day long and engaged in monitoring what's going on in Facebook and Twitter and Friend Feed and Plaxo and jumping into the conversation around my brand. How are you seeing that kind of behavior happening in kind of more mainstream world as well?
It is, but it's rare that we'd see a VP that would be that involved. I mean, granted, this is a smaller company than we would say like Best Buy, but what we're seeing is dedicated roles emerging. These two roles are typically the community manager and the social media strategist. The community manager is dedicated to that online experience. Like our friend Frank at Comcast Cares.
Right.
So, and his team is almost going to have 10 people just focusing on Twitter, if I understand that right. So there's people that are dedicated just to that online support experience. Dedicated roles are happening.
And as we saw with Comcast Cares, when you do it well, it can have a really big, disproportionate positive impact. So.
It can. But the challenge here is, can they scale? Can they hire enough people to do this? Or are we going to have some tools in place or websites that help users to self-support each other rather than going to Comcast Direct?
For new installations, tweet one.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, I'm able.
IVR, TVR, Twitter.
I'm barely able to stay on top of it right now, and it's very interesting because whenever I do find someone, particularly if someone is upset about something, and if I reach out, just the very fact that someone from the company's reached out, and in some cases also that it's like, an executive of the company has reached out, it's so remarkable how that can quickly turn into someone going from maybe hating on a company to loving a company just based on that kind of interaction. But I have no idea how that scales.
Well, it's that authenticity, right? I think that's something you've talked about too, Jeremy, right? That the trick for brands in a way is if you want to be in a real community and actually be a participant, there has to be a genuine authenticity there, and that's kind of different than traditional brands and advertising has really been.
Right.
And some people can pull it off, but it is this very high touch kind of thing.
It is. The whole new skill set around community management is starting to appear. And typically the best community managers come out of that community that they're supporting. So we're starting to see that. Now, back to your question about scale, John. So a lot of new tools are appearing, and we're seeing CRM systems suck in social data now. So so users of Salesforce.com, one of the biggest CRM systems out there, they can actually see which one of their customers, and they start to line up the information, just like tweeting or where they are, or if they've interacted in a social network. So that's really interesting to see how the companies are responding to that.
Cool. Well, I think it's pretty clear there's a lot going on in this space.
Lots.
Thanks for coming on.
Sure.
And I'd love to circle back. I know you keep doing research, and this space is moving so fast. It makes sense to have you back and share stuff as it comes along.
And you keep a blog in addition to the formal reports you do for us.
Yeah,
right?
just Google web strategy.
So we'll link that up on the show. But
Thank you.
Definitely a good stream to follow.
Cool. Well, once again, there's so much stuff going on that it's really important that you tune in again next week for another exciting episode of the Social Web TV.